Hello, I am Amanda, an instructor with the Cloud Project, and today I will be teaching you a little bit about food sustainability. But before we begin, there are a few things you'll need. Please print out the activity sheet linked in the description below. You will also need a pair of scissors. If you do not have a printer, you may copy down the names of each of these 6 ingredients on a separate piece of paper: basil, Roma tomatoes, crushed tomatoes, yellow squash, diced onion, and minced garlic. You will be using these for the activity later. You will also want to have a pen and paper or a pen in your notebook for writing some things down. So the overall goal of this video and the others under the category of cooking and agriculture is to examine how dietary choices, which is basically what we eat and where we get our food, affect the environment, as well as ways to help the environment. These are some vocabulary words that you can watch out for throughout the presentation. I will define them as they come up, although I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Ratatouille from the Pixar movie. To be able to understand sustainable farming and the need for it, we have to first look at conventional farming, which is a large part of the current food industry. The goal of this method of farming is to maximize crop yield. To achieve this, companies and farmers use genetically modified seeds, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides. Fertilizers help foods grow, while pesticides kill the insects that eat those crops. Conventional farms also practice monocropping, which means that they grow fields of only one crop. Lots of crops, like corn, wheat, and soy, are grown using conventional agriculture, which uses a lot of these pesticides and fertilizers. This is because corn, for example, is needed for reasons other than eating. Corn is grown for food, but it can also be converted into car gasoline. Just think about how many of you or your classmates get driven to school either in your own car or by a school bus. Those cars and buses need a lot of gas to run. This is why producing lots of crops is valued by conventional farms. This method of farming, however, is very harmful to the environment because the chemicals used by these farms in the pesticides and fertilizers can trickle into drinking water or other bodies of water. But we'll get back to that later on. Sustainable farming, on the other hand, is focused on making sure our planet's food resources can last for generations to come. Sustainable farms use more holistic methods without the use of chemical additives. Holistic basically means that lots of areas of a problem are looked at in order to make the best solution. This usually means that farmers prioritize biodiversity, or lots of plants and animals, on their farms. In holistic farming, farmers incorporate both animals and plants onto their farms. One benefit of this method is that animal and plant waste can be recycled. For example, cow manure, or poop, can be used to fertilize crops, while those crops can be used to feed the animals. Certain animals can also be used as natural pest control, as they may eat the pests for food, which then prevents the loss of crops without the use of chemicals. As you can see, everything is connected. Sustainable farming also emphasizes giving back to the earth. Crop rotation is one method used to achieve this goal. For example, corn and soy are often rotated on and off the same piece of land because that keeps the soil healthy. This more complete and efficient method of farming makes farming cheaper and also reduces the environmental impact from chemical runoff because fewer fertilizers and pesticides are used. Now that we have the foundation of 2 important farming methods, let's get a bit more specific. Where have you seen these labels? Can you think of some examples? Take a moment to write down some of your thoughts and pause this video right now. Alright, so here are some examples. At the grocery store, you may have seen organic fruit like these raspberries here, organic and free-range eggs, and even natural nut butters. So now you may be wondering how food labels and these farming methods are really related, and what those food labels mean to us. Well, firstly, USDA organic labeled products must be grown or made with ingredients grown according to very strict guidelines. Organic crops are grown without the use of chemical pesticides or fertilizers and cannot be GMOs, which stands for genetically modified organisms. Now that sounds really big and scary, but genetic modification basically just changes a plant's qualities. For example, a farmer might want to use genetically modified seeds because an insect repellent quality has been added to them. Organic products generally have the least harmful impact on the environment because they follow the strictest rules. The second label, or free range, refers to chickens and how they are raised, either for their meat or for their eggs. The chickens must have been given free space to roam and not be held in cages. This is a more natural and healthy way for the chickens to live. This is also better for the environment since the animals are happier. The last label, natural or all natural, is the most broad and unclear of the three in this presentation. The term natural can mean many different things to many different people. Unlike USDA organic, there are no firm guidelines or definitions for this label. This means that stuff labeled as natural may still have bad effects on the environment. To summarize, USDA organic is the most restrictive and therefore the most environmentally friendly indicator of the bunch. Free range means more responsible practices, but it is also very specific to only chicken and eggs. And finally, natural is not something you should look for when sourcing environmentally friendly products because it is too unspecific. Now moving on to some of the effects of different practices on the environment, as well as their connections to food labels we have gone over. Organic and free range tend to mean better practices that seek to help the environment. Natural may or may not mean sustainable methods. And non-organic products may have been, or most likely have been, grown with the use of pesticides and fertilizers, which, as mentioned before, can flow into drinking water or into other bodies of water. Remember, pesticides are meant to kill pests, but that also means that if they get into a lake, they can kill off other forms of wildlife. Non-organic and non-free-range products can also get their ingredients from factory farms which do not prioritize animal well-being. As we move into the activity, you can begin to think about one of these two questions here. 1. How can knowledge about the current food situation help us put changes in place? And 2. What changes can we make in our daily eating habits that will benefit the environment? I'll stop here and allow you to pause the video so that you can begin to think about each question and decide which one you feel like you want to answer. You can also begin to jot down some notes into your notebook or onto your piece of paper as you think about your question. Now let's dive into the activity. This slide shows you an example recipe for ratatouille. Ratatouille is a vegetable dish that usually has a red sauce and layers of vegetables. We will be selecting ingredients to practice sourcing from this. Ingredient sourcing is basically actively seeking out certain ingredients according to what you're looking for. Today, we'll be looking for the least environmentally harmful ingredients. The selected ingredients will be yellow squash, fresh tomatoes, Roma tomatoes, basil, minced garlic, and diced onion. Here is a brief description of the activity. Feel free to pause the video here to read them on this slide or on your activity sheet, or you can just follow along as I read. In this activity, we will use some of the ingredients from the example recipe for ratatouille to simulate ingredient sourcing. Based on the pictures on the next few slides, you will use what you have learned to analyze each of the ingredients and their labels to determine which will have the least environmental impact. You will then put those ingredients into your cart. Let's get started. So here are the steps for the activity. 1. You should have your paper cutouts ready. So that means your little strips of paper with the ingredients written on them, as well as your little shopping cart icon. 2. As each new slide comes up, you will have 30 seconds to look at the image and identify any important labels. However, the point of this activity is just to get you practicing, so if 30 seconds isn't long enough for you, feel free to pause the video to finish. 3. Put the ingredient into your shopping cart or leave it to the side. This will depend on which label you identified. Hint: look for organic, free-range, and all-natural labels. This will test your knowledge of the lesson content. And 4. Have fun. The first ingredient is yellow squash, and the 30-second timer is now counting down. Be sure to analyze the image for any labels we discussed. Alright, time's up. The second ingredient is crushed tomatoes in a can. Alright, now the third ingredient is a bag of Roma tomatoes. The fourth ingredient is fresh basil. And the fifth ingredient is minced garlic. The final ingredient is diced onion. Alright, now let's see how you did. So the ingredients that would most likely have had the least environmental impact are both the squash and the basil because they are organic. The crushed tomatoes simply said all natural, which doesn't mean any positive environmental consideration. And then the other ingredients had nothing listed on their packaging that would indicate organic or even non-GMO status, so we should just leave them on the shelf. As a note for older kids, if you enjoy cooking and would like to take this activity further, you can try sourcing the ingredients for this dish or another recipe, and even cook the dish. However, please be careful and have adult supervision when handling sharp or hot appliances or kitchen tools. Now let's take a moment to reflect on this lesson. How would you answer the question you chose? They're both listed here for you to see again. You can pause the video right now and use your piece of paper or notebook to write down your answers. Okay, so we're going to go over a few points on this slide, but remember that there are no right or wrong answers here. Each of your food choices are your own, and we just want to get you thinking about how you can take action for the environment. There are a couple of points we would like you to remember, though. In reference to the first question, basic awareness of the food situation, such as what you learned today about conventional and sustainable farming, can help you be on the lookout for various brands in grocery stores or in restaurants. Based on your awareness, you can begin to make smarter choices about where you purchase your food. And then, in reference to the second question, you can make whatever choices you feel comfortable with. As we mentioned earlier, each of you will have different likes and dislikes. Just know that changes can be as small as choosing a piece of organic fruit for snack, or as large as committing to an entirely organic or cruelty-free diet. Alright, now that we've got the reflection done, you can head over to the short quiz in the description to test your knowledge. If you enjoyed this video or you learned something new, please consider liking this video or subscribing to the Cloud Project. See you next time.